Welcome back to another episode of Chatting Cinema. Today is May 3rd, but this episode comes out on May 4th, aka Star Wars Day.
That
And so we
is,
wanted to have a little chat about Star Wars.
Chatting
yes,
cinema.
little,
Yeah.
uh, you know, kind of random pod about Star Wars and
Yeah.
just talking about it. It's
So, have you guys ever seen Star Wars before?
once or twice,
Yeah,
once,
now
once or
that's pod
twice.
racing.
Yeah,
You can
once
tell
or
by
twice stuff.
Luke's background that he's a fan.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I wish I was in those stands. I miss sports.
Yeah, Star Wars sports,
Yes,
Yeah.
Star Wars
Star
sports
sports.
only.
betting,
Yeah.
betting in a cantina.
Pretty good year for Star Wars. We had
Yeah, I'd
episode
say
9 come
so.
out, and then Clone Wars is wrapping up very soon.
Yeah, and
What a
Clone
time.
Wars, I think has gotten everybody in the Star Wars mood.
Yeah.
And I think that I go back and forth, and I think a lot of people go back and forth on the strategy to release episodes weekly instead of dropping them all at once like the typical streaming service model. But I think that especially for Clone Wars and how this last season is kind of like shaped up and kind of progressed through the episodes they've released, it was really smart to release them like this because I think that each arc and episode kind of got better as the season went on, culminating in like probably my favorite arc they've ever done on the show in these last few episodes. And it's gotten everybody super in the Star Wars mood for right in time for May 4th, which has been nice. And it's been cool to, every Friday. I jumped into this season. I watched the first couple episodes when they released, and then I watched the rest pretty late a couple weeks ago. But even so, like, especially with this final arc of this final season, like watching everybody each week kind of take to social media and talk about it and kind of geek out over it has been really cool and has built a nice sense of community when we're all kind of looking for it, being stuck inside and everything.
Yeah, I
And,
mean, I was one of the biggest advocates of I hate you, Disney, for not releasing them all at once. I've said it multiple times on this podcast. I said it on my other podcast. I've said it to almost everybody that will listen to me talk about Star Wars, where I was like, bro, you're only giving us 13 and you're making us wait week by week. Well, I don't know how many people, because I didn't even realize this until 2 weeks ago, that they were planning the last one to come out on May the 4th, which I didn't know. And also, a little touch that they added for these last 3 episodes, and what I'm assuming the 4th, is in the very beginning, it says a Lucasfilm limited production.
Love
This
it.
ain't episodes. This is basically like a Clone Wars finale movie that we're watching once a week for a month.
Yeah.
And like Flynn had touched on, I mean, I don't know if there's an arc that's just better. Like, you might have an arc that you favor more,
Right.
but this is the culmination of the Clone Wars. This is why we're getting this TV show, is that we got all these new characters and new stories that took place in between 2 and 3. And it's like, okay, so the entire time, I remember the first day I heard about Clone Wars and they were like, Anakin has an apprentice. I'm like, so what happens to her during Order 66? Well, these episodes help answer that question that 12-year-old Luke wanted to know. So...
Well, and that happens to be the consensus too. Like episode 11 is like peak Star Wars. Like seeing that tie into Revenge of the Sith and Order 66 go down from Ahsoka's point of view.
So cool.
Yeah.
Wild.
And like Rex's story, because like we see
Yeah.
Rex in Rebels, and it's like, okay, we know he knows because there was that episode in season 6 where they figured that out. But it's like, how did he get there? Because you don't just like escape Order 66, like you, and clearly this last episode's gonna fill in those final details. So if you're listening to this, you've probably watched the episode already. We are all jealous of you. We will get there too. I mean, I know Flynn and I both said we're marathoning all 9 Star Wars tomorrow to celebrate, as you all should. As you all should. Because when else are you gonna have the 26 hours to watch all of them?
Yeah, and touching back on that Lucasfilm limited touch, I love that so much, and their red Clone Wars logo, because it just kind of like, because I remember when the first episode of this arc dropped was when I got back to catching up on this season, and that being like the kind of break and like, no, you got the Clone Wars that you've got so far, and it's been good and it's been fun to see Ahsoka again and meet the Bad Batch and everything, but this is a little bit different. This is more special. This is what you came for, and that's been really awesome to see. And like Gianni was saying about sort of enriching Revenge of the Sith, like Clone Wars has done that, and that's been the big, I think, proponent for everybody who loves this show, is like it makes the prequels something they weren't before. It fills in gaps. It gives you different ways to look at the characters. It kind of, in a lot of ways, especially I think with Anakin Skywalker, gives you kind of the vision of the character that you probably had before or thought that he should be. I think that's how Anakin is in Clone Wars. But this arc kind of just like ramped that up a notch as far as like taking place concurrently with Revenge of the Sith, having different angles of scenes we've already seen, and just like showing it from a different point of view, showing you where characters were. I saw somebody on Twitter made a cut of how, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Ahsoka talking to Jedi Council in like hologram form, being 37 seconds away from seeing Anakin. You know, like that kind of like crazy attention to detail that shows just how much care went into these final episodes of this show that a lot of people really love. Has been really cool.
Speaking of Twitter nods. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is quick, Gianni. Speaking of Twitter nods, there was a side-by-side done of the scene where Ahsoka is flying away like from like the cruiser ship, and Anakin senses her, to Luke flying past and Darth Vader sensing him. And Anakin and Vader's exact mannerisms are the same. And like really the way they show Ahsoka and Luke is the same. Like the scenes were almost mirrored, and I was just like, God.
We lost Luke there talking about.
Luke is gone.
Ahsoka. And...
This is what's great about doing a Zoom podcast. This is
you never know what you're gonna get.
You never know.
But before he kicks back on, because hopefully that comes on, just we're probably going to be talking about Clone Wars. So don't mean to spoil anything, but this is kind of your warning if you haven't watched, just in case we do get into more specific things.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can't wait for that 1 hour cut that somebody's going to make of this 4-episode arc. Like,
I'm super stoked to watch that too. In fact, depending on like when that comes out and everything, maybe I'll wait for that to watch the last episode.
Yeah.
Yay.
Welcome back.
All right. Welcome
so
back.
This is going to be a really fun episode for Gianni to edit, because
I'm leaving it all the way it is.
Yeah.
Oh no. No.
We mentioned that you dropped out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was recording an episode the other day and it froze, and I came back and Cassie was like, "Do I have to say all that again?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, we kept it going. We were just talking about how exciting it would be to see like a 1 hour cut of this 4-episode arc, or even like if they splice it in with Revenge of the Sith. Like
that'd be really cool.
That'd be really.
Somebody's gonna do that.
Oh,
During this quarantine, somebody gonna have the time to cut Revenge of the Sith with these 4 episodes. That would be sick.
Topher Grace, get on it.
Yeah, I was gonna say Topher Grace will be the one.
Yeah,
Eddie Brock himself.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that they're just pulling it off. Like, because the Clone Wars finale has been probably the most hyped thing in this fandom since the Clone Wars got canceled, and we were all non-believers being like, no, that's gonna happen. Like, they're gonna give us the rest. And they're actually living up to it. I think that's the craziest part.
Yeah, the one thing about it is like when this last episode comes out, I'm gonna be the same way. Like, oh man, I kind of want more. You know, like that's the.
I think the best shows do that to you, though.
Yeah, for sure. I think that people have knocked the episode arcs that came before this one is kind of like, they weren't as good, but like it was still cool to see like different corners. Like I thought the Bad Batch was really interesting, and seeing the lower levels of Coruscant in the second arc was cool too, because like that's a side of Coruscant that we've never seen. It's always, and I think that Star Wars sometimes gets knocked for this, where every planet is like one thing. It's one biome, one type of place. And I think it added some interesting diversity to how we now view Coruscant, because we only really see we see the grimy parts because it's a city. There's guys selling death sticks in bars, this and that. There's bounty hunters, but like that, seeing like poverty in Coruscant that way.
I think
really
another thing to build off of that is that we saw how close to episode 3 the people of Coruscant truly felt about the Jedi and the war as well. Where like that arc, it wasn't just Ahsoka and more girl characters, going off and doing something. No, it was important for a lot of reasons where it's like, this is grounding you in the universe. Like, okay, this is where the universe is at, because in the movies, we are seeing the Jedi doing their Jedi thing. We are not seeing what the people think. Like literally the people on the same planet. We don't know what they think of the Jedi. We just know that the Jedi are fighting the droids and the Sith Lords, however many there are, and they're all their assorted apprentices, all that jazz. That could be a reality show, like The Bachelor, like picking your next apprentice. That's pretty much what the arc was with Savage.
Right.
But somebody should recut that to be a Bachelor episode. Oh my God. This Star Wars podcast is just breeding so many great ideas for this fandom. So somebody listening, please do it, because we're not going to.
And not to get saucy, but I did find it kind of interesting how people were kind of more receptive to that arc of like questioning the Jedi, their motives and their abilities, than people are to Last Jedi. I don't know if it's because like I think that there's a view of like Clone Wars and Star Wars TV, where they're not feature films, so they're kind of secondary Star Wars. So there's less of like an onus to be perfect and do exactly what somebody wants them to do. But I saw people like finding that really interesting. Like, oh man, like this is how people feel about the Jedi. This is what the Jedi's legacy is, and it's like, yeah. That sounds familiar.
Well, not to group people, but most people who dislike The Last Jedi say that like Clone Wars is like the cream de la crop of Star Wars, so it can do no wrong in their eyes. So if it took them this way to finally figure it out, maybe the next time they watch Last Jedi, they might be more interested.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's my favorite part, though, about season 7 specifically, is like the Jedi don't seem like heroes anymore.
Mace Windu in one episode.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil things, but if you're listening to this, you probably watched it. Like, Mace Windu was ruthless with Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and treating Ahsoka like a protagonist for most of this season, and kind of like, because again, like, her journey to disillusionment with the Jedi is so fascinating, and it's one of the things that makes her one of the most popular Star Wars characters. Like, people love Ahsoka, and I thought it was cool that they let that be. And I think there's a couple of nods to Last Jedi visually and story wise that
there are. Yeah.
Show like how Filoni and how Filoni feels and the story group feels about.
I mean, I think that's one of the best parts about these episodes is that like it feels like a movie, and there's so many moments that feel like Revenge of the Sith or feel like The Last Jedi, or feel like you see these moments where it's like clearly they're throwing to that like, yo, this was dope and we're doing it too,
Right.
Just like shots and like the way things are set up, which a lot of times TV shows don't get that treatment, or people don't think about them that way. But the way Star Wars fans are viewing this, like, this is like, give us this movie. Like, this is a movie for us.
Yeah, the cool thing about it too is like, Dave Filoni obviously is behind a lot of it, but George Lucas was still a really integral part of the show and the design of it, the stories, the characters. And that's really cool too, because he gets so much flack for the prequels, but then this kind of like fixes the prequels in a lot of ways for so many people.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. I'm glad that like that's the takeaway from Clone Wars, because I can like very easily see an argument of like Clone Wars kind of dampening the prequels, kind of being like, oh man, this is what we should have gotten instead of what we got. So I'm glad that like the majority opinion on it is like supplementary material that enhances what we already have versus disparages what we got with the prequels.
I mean, the public opinion of Star Wars has been drastically changing the last few years though.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because like our generations grew up with the prequels, so we are like our generation in general is not nearly as critical as Star Wars fans were of the prequels. I mean, I grew up loving them. I saw all three in theaters as a kid, and then still now I love them. And then the Clone Wars just added to it. But like even like it's like there's always a divide. We were kind of talking about this before the episode started, where everybody compares something to something in the Star Wars fandom, where it's like you can't go 2 seconds without talking about a character until there's 5 comparisons in your replies.
Right.
But or even movies or shows, whatever it is. But I think this May the 4th, we should all just love these damn movies. Like, just enjoy them all because they are wonderful for different reasons. Like, Attack of the Clones is my least favorite, but when I watch it, I'm going to be damn pleased and happy as hell because it's Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely.
Switching gears a little bit, maybe, into, I guess, Star Wars as a whole. I mean, obviously, it means so much to the three of us, and even more so to entire generations of people.
Yeah.
And I think this particular Star Wars Day is going to be super cool because we have that Mandalorian documentary series dropping.
It's going to be lit.
That's every episode all at once, right? So that's what, like 8 hours of behind the scenes Mando, which is going to be really cool. Obviously, we have the capper of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And then the 9th film in the Skywalker saga is on Disney Plus. So
I was super excited when they announced that they were releasing Rise of Skywalker. I know opinions are all over the place on that movie. We've kind of litigated it, what we liked and what we didn't. But as films started to, I remember when Onward hit Disney Plus, I was like, oh man, when is Rise of Skywalker gonna hit? Because they released it digitally to rent and own early. It's like, oh, I hope it hits soon. And this is way sooner. I don't know if they would have coordinated it to be on May 4th if this quarantine didn't happen, if that still would have been in their plans. I feel like it wouldn't have been because, like you were just touching on,
they already had so much.
Yeah, I think the docuseries and the finale of Clone Wars would have been more than enough content to drop that day. But I'm super stoked that they're releasing Rise of Skywalker.
For our Star Wars fans at home, if you already don't have enough to watch tomorrow, as in today, because we're releasing this on May 4th, Netflix has this really great documentary series called The Toys That Made Us. There's an episode about Star Wars where they go in depth about how the Star Wars toy brand started from the 1970s all the way until now. It's ironic that this Star Wars thing is on Netflix because now they're not friendly anymore. But that documentary series, just each episode goes in depth on a different toy brand. And I watched the Star Wars one with my brother, and it was fascinating learning about like how there was a bid war to get the rights to Star Wars after the first movie came out. Because the first movie came out, nobody wanted they were like, we don't want this toy line, it's going to suck. And then the movie happened, they're like, we want this toy line, like we'll give you millions of dollars for it. So yeah, just add that to the list of things to watch. But yeah, no, I'm excited for this May 4th just because this documentary series about The Mandalorian, we already know it's revolutionary in its filming, where it was almost all filmed on stages with backgrounds and this like insane technology that we don't know about. We gonna learn. I am excited to see that.
Yeah, I was just gonna touch on that. Like when they started like kind of tweeting that out and writing articles about what they used to film Mandalorian and the crazy new sound stages they built with like moving backgrounds, kind of like 360 degrees around the soundstage. Like that's incredible because when you see typically when you see like pictures from behind the scenes of a set or a soundstage, you kind of like put it together, right? Like when they did the behind the scenes video for like Infinity War and Endgame, and you see them on sound stages and there are blue screens everywhere, you can kind of put it together in your head like, oh, okay, this is where this goes. But I look at the pictures from behind the scenes of Mandalorian and I'm like, how did that culminate into what I see on the screen? It makes no sense to me logically just looking at it. So I'm super excited to kind of like get in depth in that process and hear the people that made it talk about that, and also the amount of talent behind the screen they brought on. You know, Bryce Dallas Howard directed that episode, Taika's there. So to hear these different kind of storytellers talk about why they wanted to play in the sandbox and what they brought to the table is going to be really cool too. Because Mandalorian is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely known, like, each episode, like, all right, you're not bringing in these big names without having a camera following them while they're directing too. Like, I mean, each episode was like a heavy hitter director or newcomers that we're excited to see more of. Yeah. And then Jon Favreau producing. I mean, I would love, obviously he's going to be in this documentary series. To what extent, we don't know. But like to see interviews or like even like a room with like a bunch of the writers and directors and him just talking, like, because this show was just so well produced in general. Just like, it felt very clean. It was just from top to bottom. It looked great. The stories were good. The characters were good. The music was great. Like, I would just love to know how this all came together. I mean, our boy Dave Filoni was over there too. So I'd be surprised if we don't see that cowboy hat in that. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And speaking of all this behind the scenes stuff, like it's on YouTube now on the Star Wars page, but I didn't even think for a second that the fight between Ahsoka and Darth Maul was all mocap. And then to see that behind the scenes was insane.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was.
Luke didn't know.
Yeah. I haven't seen the video of the mocap, but I remember. I feel bad because I can't remember who did the interview, whether it was like an outlet or Star Wars released it themselves. But I remember Sam Witwer, who, for those of you who don't know, does the voice of Darth Maul in the Clone Wars series, talking about how he always felt like something was missing as much as he poured into his Darth Maul. And then they brought Ray Park, who plays Darth Maul in Phantom Menace, on to do mocap. And he was just immediately like, it just clicked for him. It was like, oh, that was missing. Ray was missing. Ray is as much Darth Maul as I am. And we kind of saw that in Solo, because Ray Park plays Darth Maul visually, and then Sam Witwer does the voice work, because Darth Maul doesn't have much dialogue in Phantom Menace, so Sam has kind of become Maul's voice. So we got that combination in Solo, but it's a brief cameo. Darth Maul doesn't really do anything. So to see it come to life in this way has been really cool, because a lot of people really love Darth Maul as a character. So to see him kind of play this like integral part and occupy like a really interesting like gray area, where he can have these moments with Ahsoka where it's like they are not on the same side, but they're also not to the extremes of the other side in certain ways. I mean, Darth Maul is insane, but he's still not with the Sith. He's against the Sith and against the Jedi, and Ahsoka is against the Sith and has kind of turned her back on the Jedi. So to see them kind of in this weird center try and convince each other to go one way and stuff has been really interesting. It's always the best when Star Wars plays with that kind of like less clear-cut moral space. As much as I love the black and white, evil people are evil and good people are good stories that make you feel hopeful and everything, and that good wins, that's not how the world is. And so I think that Star Wars in a lot of ways has kind of evolved with the times and with the perception of how things are.
And what you just said directly applies to Rogue One, touches on that a lot. And speaking of Rogue One, Darth Vader's hallway scene may have been dope, but did Maul top it? Because apparently it's not over either.
Yeah. So for me personally, I don't love Darth Vader's hallway scene. I think it's a little much, but I think that it's kind of like shoehorned in there. And I also think that people kind of like remember Rogue One differently than what it actually is because that scene's in there. I think they kind of like remember that scene and they're like, oh man, Rogue One was dope, but they don't, whatever. But
that's a different topic.
Darth Maul's hallway scene I really like because I think it makes a lot more sense for Darth Maul's character to be that way. Because Darth Vader, the thing that makes him, at the very least, a top 3 film villain of all time, I think, is like quiet intimidation and strength. I don't think he needs to put on these like massive displays to exude strength. It's quiet force chokes. It's just pure intimidation where, he doesn't need to bust into a room with a lightsaber slaughtering everybody because just walking into it has the same effect. Whereas Maul, I think, is a lot more unhinged and it makes more sense. And also, again, Gianni and I mentioned when you dropped out that we were going to touch on spoilers. So just in case you haven't seen it, here comes a spoiler, I guess.
Spoiler alert!
But Vader has a lightsaber during that scene. So he's force sensitive and has a lightsaber and it's just a straight slaughter. Versus Maul doesn't have any weapons. So he's using the force and whatever's around him to get through like a whole regiment of the clone army. But I think it just like was more interesting power dynamics. I think it makes more sense for Maul as a character. So for me, like that's what I was looking for in a hallway scene. And that scene had the same effect on me that the Vader scene had on a lot of people. Because there are so many, I think the majority of people like really love that scene. And it's awesome that it works for them in that way. And this Maul scene worked for me in the way that the Vader scene works for a lot of other people.
I mean, I'm going to just say it. Maul's my favorite Star Wars character. He has been for so long, and every single time he pops up in something else, it's just like, yep, you were right to pick this when you were 5 years old. Like, every single time he shows up, it's just amazing. I am so excited for this next episode that when this episode is out, that future Luke will have seen. So good job, future Luke. Congratulations, you won. Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts about Clone Wars is that it feels like the unifying medium of all different fans of Star Wars, where if you like the prequels, if you like the sequels, like, you like Clone Wars. Like, I don't know if I've met a Star Wars fan that's like, oh, I hate the Clone Wars. Like, everybody at least likes it and has watched some episodes from it, or they're just discovering it now, which I would pay lots of money to be able to watch it for the first time again. Oh my God. And to watch it in like chronological order for the first time. Oh, that would be lit. But yeah, no, I mean, every Maul scene just gets me so happy and excited. And I know we're supposed to be rooting against him, but God damn it. Like the scene where he's trying to be like, listen, Ahsoka, like this is a spoiler, but like we're long past that spoiler tag. They know. But like, he's like, Ahsoka, Anakin about to do some bad stuff. And I'm just like, he's right though.
Yeah.
Like those moments where you're yelling at your TV, like he's right. Listen to him.
That moment was so interesting to me too, because like if it was any other Jedi, right? Maybe not Obi-Wan, because Ahsoka has a relationship with Obi-Wan too, because of her proximity to Anakin. But if it was any other Jedi, that scene goes differently. The fact that it's Anakin and Ahsoka's, loyalty and faith in Anakin versus what the Jedi Council represents is the main thing pushing her back. And her being wrong in that scene, her trust in Anakin betrays her. I thought that was so great, because despite, that's the reason a lot of prequels don't work, is you kind of know what's going to happen. So it removes some of the tension. But those scenes, despite knowing where these characters are going to end up, were filled with tension for me and filled with suspense of not knowing where this was going to go. And that is such a hard thing to pull off. So, props to that whole team. They did something really special with this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, sort of in closing, I think Star Wars is probably like the perfect escape right now for a lot of people. And it's great that we have so much content coming out, especially on Star Wars Day. If you're not someone who has been along for the ride the whole time, what a great time to get started with all 9 Skywalker films on Disney Plus. The Clone Wars series is wrapped up. The Mandalorian series is out. This, that, and the other. Star Wars is everywhere, and we love it.
Yeah, definitely. And if somehow this is, you've never watched Star Wars and you were looking to get into it because everybody's going to be talking about it on May 4th. After you watch every movie, you can listen to us talk about Star Wars because we did a retrospective for the 8 Skywalker saga films leading up to Rise of Skywalker, and then we did an episode strictly about our thoughts and kind of reviewing what happened with that. So you can use that as a companion piece. We talked about Star Wars a bunch. But yeah, like Gianni touched on, Star Wars is the perfect escapism for right now because it's all about hope and love, and that's what's needed at this moment in time. So it's cool that this May 4th is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be in a different place, but I think that it's something that's necessary right now.
Yeah. So may the 4th be with everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. I love Star Wars.